Welcome to an episode of Life Stories at Marty, Australia. I'm Marty here in Melbourne, and boy, if you like music and your books, this is a great show. I have Irish legend, one of the winners of 1994 Eurovision Song Contest, Charlie McGettigan. Hope I pronounced that right, Charlie. Alongside they won in 1994 alongside the well-known Paul Harrington. Now, I'm going to, before we start off, I'm going to play a couple of songs. And the first I'm going to play it is the Eurovision Song Contest, which complements of RTE. And alongside that, I'm going to play the guys on the Late Late Show back to back that played just over a year ago, I think it was. Let's have a listen to that. And then instead of me rambling on about this singer, songwriter, broadcaster, and author, a lot more talents. So let's join Charlie on this side after these two songs.
I remember 62. I was 16 and so were you. And we lived next door on the avenue. Jerry Lee was big and Elvis too. Blue jeans and blue suede shoes. And we never knew what life held in store. We just wanted to rock and roll forevermore. We were the rock and roll kids. Rock and roll was all we did. And listening to those songs on the radio. I was yours and you were mine. But that was once upon a time. Now we never seem to rock and roll anymore. Now Johnny's in love with the girl next door. Mary's down at the record store. They don't want to be around us no more. Golden oldies, but we hardly speak. Too busy running to a different beat, hard to understand. We were once like that. How I wish we could find those rock and roll days again. We were the rock and roll kids, and rock and roll was all we did. And listening to those songs on the radio. I was yours and you were mine. But that was once upon a time. Now we never seem to rock and roll anymore. I was yours and you were mine. That was once upon a time. Now we never seem to rock and roll. We just never seem to rock and roll anymore.
Charlie, what a pleasure. And thank you so much for coming on the show. And to see you eventually, we had a couple of chats.
Yeah, well, you know, what you see now is what I look like now. What I don't look anything like I did way back then when we were talking before we came on air about Eurovision and stuff like that. People say, "Is that him? Is that really him?"
We've just watched at the front of it the Eurovision with
Yeah.
yourself and your good friend Paul, And then we
Yeah.
have one that plays later, which was, I think, a year ago on RT that you did the same. But you know
Okay.
what? You've never lost your voices. My God.
Marty, during COVID, I got I did very little symptoms of COVID, but since COVID, I've got a crackle in my voice, and nobody else notices except me. When you go to reach a high note, you kind of think, it squeaks a bit. But I'm 74. I'm lucky to be singing it all, says you. I'm lucky to be over the ground, as they say here in Leitrim. But it's great to talk to you, Marty, because the last time we talked was just before coming on, and I think the conversation lasted something like 3.5, 4 hours.
That's
Because
right.
of
Yes, I can talk.
and the great thing about these days is when you're talking to somebody in Australia, you're not looking at your watch and counting how much it's costing you, because with technology and everything else, it's so cheap now to make phone calls and to talk to people in faraway places. But you told me earlier on, again before we came on there, that this is, I feel like you're Eamon Andrews and I'm Rod Stewart or somebody. And good morning, Charlie. This is your life, and here it is. And I suppose the funny thing, Marty, I can remember stuff back in when I was 3 or 4 years of age, even less. I can remember that better than I can remember what happened yesterday. I keep forgetting things at this age, but my mother and father met in a hotel in Bundoran back in 1947. Pat McGettigan was his name, and Maura Buckley was her name. And they struck up a little kind of a correspondence. In those days, there wouldn't be emails or text messaging or anything like
No,
that. It had a letter, and you would wonder, did the person get it, or they just didn't want to reply. But anyway, they struck up a relationship by mail, and eventually they ran away to London, the two of them. Now, in 1948, that would have been scandalous, you
oh,
know. Absolutely. You don't run off and live with somebody without getting married and stuff like that. And both families were horrified that this happened, because they were a wee bit snobby. And I suppose, having grown up in a Catholic tradition, they were kind of, oh my God, this is terrible. But they came back and got married in late 1949, early 1950. And I was born in December 1950 in a place called Holles Street Hospital. I'm sure you remember it, Marty. You were probably born there yourself, seeing as you're a dub.
I
But
wasn't. I was the Curragh Camp Military Hospital.
oh,
But
that's right. You told
my daughter, who's Australian, um, Charlie, she actually was born there,
in Holles Street. Yeah, it was the national ceremony.
1991.
Yeah, yeah, crikey. The years fly by. But I lived in Dublin with my mum, because my mum's her mother, my grandmother, she had a very bad rheumatoid arthritis. So my mum stayed with her for maybe 2, 3 years. So I lived in a place called Effra Road in Rathmines when for maybe the first 3, 4 years of my life. But I can remember it so vividly. What it was like, and I remember the things from that period, like the horse-drawn milk
Yeah,
delivery truck. The horse he would shit all over the road, and people would rush out to get the manure to get for their gardens and stuff like that. There'd be a mad scramble. But I used to hear him about 6 in the morning. You'd hear this click clack, I think, coming up, and the rattle of the bottles and the whole lot. And I would have been only 3 years of age at that time. And I remember the first piece of music that I ever heard that I can remember was a piece called O'Donnell Aboo, which they used to play every morning on Radio Earn before they came on air. They would play it for about 3 minutes before, dun, dun, da, dun, dun, da, dun, dun, da,
yeah.
dun, dun, da, dun. That piece. And that used to be played every morning. And we didn't have a radio. I used to hear it from next door, because the walls must have been quite thin, but I could hear this lovely tune being played, and it has always stuck in my mind. And if you listen carefully to the the current RTE News music, the music that they use in there,
Mm,
hidden in it, is dan dan da dan dan da. You'll hear it in
yeah. I
in
can
the
actually. I
background.
watched it on the IRE player, RT player. Yeah,
Yeah. So it's in there somewhere. But even then, I remember the street was, I remember the street has been a huge, big street. And quite recently, I decided I'm going to pay a visit to Effra Road after all these years. And of course, the street had diminished, and even the house we lived. Believe it or not, Marty, my wife and I, when we got married first, we looked at an apartment in the very house that my mother had grown up in. It was we didn't know at the time, we just saw apartment and went. And when I walked in, I realized then, checkers, this is my mother's house. And it seemed so small because in my memory it's like South Fork, there's huge big stairs all over the place, but it's quite small. It was a semi-detached house in Effra Road, or detached a terraced house actually in Effra Road. But and I remember Dublin was completely. You remember Dublin in those days? It was great to get on the bus and the conductor. And you climbed on at the back of the bus. There was kind of an open space in the back of the bus.
Yeah.
I always wanted to be a bus conductor just so as I could turn that machine when click, click, and the ticket came out, And I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to play that machine, it's just great. But anyway, Dublin, fabulous memories. My dad would come up maybe once a month from Ballyshannon, where he was working at the time. And he would always bring me into Wellworths or Woolworths. There were two, actually, Wellworths and Woolworths down in Henry Street at the time. And he would buy me a toy, and that was the great thing about having him away, that he'd have to come back and be nice to me, and he used to bring me fishing up on the Dodder River up in Rathfarnham, which wasn't far. We could walk to it, that kind of. And I remember him actually taking me on the bar of the bike. Do people still get rides on the bars of bikes? You remember you'd sit up on the handlebar.
We used to do it all the time, and not just one on the back. You'd have one on the back if you're holding on with the shoulders, and you could have one in the front.
You wouldn't. Yeah, you wouldn't do it nowadays. Not
you have to wear helmets nowadays.
Absolutely, helmets weren't even invented in those days. But eventually, then my mum decided she was going to move to Donegal to be with my father full time, and we brought her mother with us. I remember moving to Ballyshannon, which was a population of about 2,000 people at the time. And when I think back on it now, and I compare it to what it is now, I had to do a program with Joe Duffy one day and talk about Ballyshannon. And Ballyshannon at that time had 17 grocery outlets, just people selling groceries alone in the town. And in those days, there was no such thing as shopping centres or shopping malls. You could get everything you wanted. You got your school uniform, you got your winter coat, you got your groceries, you got everything, your television or your radio. There wasn't any television, but you got your radio. Everything was in that space. So that, it was a really lively place in those days. But a big difference, of course, from Dublin. I remember we lived in a housing estate called Clúnbaran, and it was a county council housing estate. What you would call county council houses. And it were people who just couldn't afford to buy houses. You rented them out for some ridiculously low rents, and it was unlike most council estates. All human life was there. There was Garda superintendents there, a police superintendent lived there, the bank manager lived there, the farmers lived there, fellas working, craftsmen lived there, all kinds of people. It was a complete melting pot of society, of Irish society at the time. And we lived there for about a year. And then because my grandmother was with us and she was incapacitated, we had to rent a bigger house. So we moved to a place called the Mall in Ballyshannon. And right next door, the very famous poet William Allingham was his residence back in the 18th century or the 19th century. He was a 19th century poet. You might have heard of a poem called Up the Airy Mountain, Down the Rushy Glen, We Daren't Go Hunting for Fear of the Men. The fellow that wrote that poem, his house was next door to our house. And I remember living there and it was kind of a dark street, but Dad brought me to see the film Davy Crockett, The King of the Wild Frontier. And it was a movie that really, I'll never forget how effective it was. I literally became obsessed with Davy Crockett. And it was a great song, Davy Crockett, the King of the Wild Frontier.
And he wore the hat.
A coonskin hat.
The coonskin hat. Yeah, I used to go out singing the song down at my granddad's on the Curragh Camp when this show was over. you be singing
Yes.
it. Sorry, go ahead, please.
Well, our street became the wilds of Tennessee, and like I remember the Christmas after I asked Santa Claus to bring me a Davy Crockett suit, and Christmas morning came and opened the presents, and there was a Davy Crockett suit, but
Wow.
no coonskin hat, and like it almost I didn't want to say, but it almost spoiled Christmas. Anyway, about 12 o'clock on Christmas Day, there was a knock on the door, and Mrs. McCusker from two doors up arrived with a fur hat and a tail on it on the back. And she said, Santa Claus must have left here by mistake, But what I didn't realize, it was her going to mass hat that she had given to me and she stuck a fur tail on the back of it and
Put it
made it
on.
into a David Crockett hat. But
What a
in those
lovely
days,
memory, though.
yeah, well, funny, there you go. I would have been about maybe 4 years of age at that stage, but those things stick in your mind,
They do indeed.
you
And
know.
especially as you said
Like,
about neighbors.
do you remember your first day going?
I beg your pardon?
Yeah, do you remember your first day at school?
I do
Do you
indeed. I
remember your
remember
first
my
day at
mum
school?
coming on the current camp and she was standing at the back of the fence and she left me off
Yeah,
and on going into the road or Higgins Terrace and you went up to it and she was on the other side.
yes.
She so embarrassed me. After she dropped me off, she was standing on the other side and I ran up to say hello to her and she's bawling her eyes out. And they're all going, "What's wrong with your mom?" I don't know.
Oh,
I
no.
just wanted to go to school.
Yeah. Well, I got my first day at school was I was dropped at the door at the school gates and left inside, and suddenly this huge monster appeared, a penguin, a giant penguin. I said, "Oh my God, what is this?" It was a nun. It was the first time I'd seen a nun in my life. This black outfit and the white wimple around here. And she was a woman called Mother Lazarian. And she said, "Hello, Charles. You're very welcome to the school." And I thought, "Oh my God, where am I landed?" And at the 11 o'clock break, I had enough. And I decided to run off. And there was I disappeared. And there was people, the nuns were going bonkers, the teachers. My mother was called, "Where has he gone? He's disappeared." And they found me 2 hours later up in Mrs. Kerrigan's house up in Clune Barn, where we had spent the year previously, eating bread and sugar sandwiches, my favorite treat of those days. Do you remember the
Oh,
bread and sugar sandwiches?
big time. Big time.
The
Yeah, or sometimes we
jam
just
was,
had goodie. That's what you got.
yeah,
If
oh
you
my
got
God.
sugar on the
Yeah,
goodie, you were
oh
posh.
man.
Yeah.
The jam was expensive. Jam was a Sunday treat,
God, yeah. But that's so the way you're saying that stories is absolutely brilliant. Now just go back a little, tell me a little bit more about your mum and your dad. And then if we can dovetail into we want to go into your music career, but while in this question is what inspired you as well to go on to the music? We'll go into some other stuff, but I'll let you go for it there, please, Charlie.
But my mother was a huge music hall fan, and Dublin at the time when she was growing up had fantastic theatre, the Theatre Royal, the Olympia Theatre, the Gaiety Theatre, the
Mm.
Capitol Theatre right in the centre of O'Connell Street. And on a Sunday night, my mother there was always told me there was this special night in the Theatre Royal, a 4 hour event which would begin with a film. Then a fellow called Tommy Dando on his Lowry organ would rise up from the tunnel up onto the stage with this huge organ and play all kind of current favorite songs. And then you would have a guest artist, somebody like maybe Bing Crosby or Laurel and Hardy. Imagine having those people in your town. And my mother, she went every for seven and sixpence, which would be about 35 cents in today's money. She would go there, and she just loved that whole music hall scene. There were people like Jack Cruz and Maureen Potter who were huge stars, in Dublin at the time. And she always would talk, and we would listen. She had the radio. Once we bought a radio. Do you remember the old radio? It was a big brown radio that you had to tune in to get the
Yeah.
stations. And we used to get the BBC up in Donegal at that time, and we listened to the Goons and the Billy Cotton Band show and all those British TV sort of variety shows, which were fantastic. When I look back on them now, and she was always singing around the house. She would never sing in public or anything, but she'd be singing all these old music hall flavors. I remember one in particular. How much is that doggy in
Oh,
the window? Woo, woo, the one with the waggly tail. And those kind of songs. And in later years, when
happy songs.
happy, oh, absolutely happy songs. The we're a couple of swells. We stop at the best hotels, but we prefer the country far away from the city smells. Those kind of songs, and I kind of knew them without ever having to learn them. I remember they were always whatever way music would come to you. You didn't. I don't remember ever learning a song, having to look at the words and learn them off by heart. You just knew them, because you were hearing them.
Yeah.
But I remember then in about 1960, you could get this chewing gum called LM chewing gum, and with each packet of chewing gum, you got a playing card, an ace or a jack of diamonds or whatever it was. And the whole idea was you built up a full deck of cards, and that was what the selling point. But on the back of each card, there was a film of an American pop star. People like the Everly Brothers, Elvis Presley, Ricky Nelson, these kind of people. And I remember seeing the Everly Brothers, and they had these two guitars. I said, "What's that?" And then one day I was listening to the radio and I heard Dwayne Eddy, who was a fellow with a big loud electric guitar. And I said, "Wow, what is that?" And I eventually discovered that's what a guitar is. And I used to pass this shop on the way home every day from school. And there was a guitar in the shop window. And I remember it was a green guitar with Hawaiian motif on the front of it. And every day I would go and look at this. And then I went one day and it was gone. It had obviously been sold. And I went into the shop and said, "Where did the guitar gone?" "Oh, Michael Doherty bought that up from Clune Barn. He bought it." And I went up and I knocked on the door and I said, "Can I see your guitar?" And he said, "Yeah." "Can I touch it? Can I hold it?" And I remember I held it and I strummed it, and it didn't sound like anything like Dwayne Eddy or Hank Marvin or anything. It just sounded awful. But I said, "Oh yes," he says, "you have to learn how to play it." "Oh, that's it." So anyway, I became obsessed with the Shadows and all those guitar bands. And my friend Arthur Green got a scholarship of £39 for a year to go to secondary school. You had to pay for your secondary school education in those days. And his mum gave him £3 just to spend on himself. And I said, "Arthur, what you should buy is an electric guitar. Buy a guitar." But he bought this guitar for £3, and it was really a bit of wood with strings on it. And I knew Arthur would never, he hadn't a note in his head, and I knew Arthur would never learn. But I said, "Arthur, I know you're not making much progress, so could you lend me the guitar?" And I got the guitar, learned how to tune it up. And I knew there was a fellow up the road from me that played guitar, and he showed me a few chords. And by Christmas of that year, I could play a couple of songs, and my mother, I said to him, "Look, I can play the guitar. Will you buy me a guitar for Christmas?" And they did. They bought me a Negmond electric guitar for Christmas. Now, I thought you just plugged it into the wall. I didn't realize you had to put it into an amplifier to make it work. But all it did was sound very, very quiet because they were solid bodies. They weren't, they hadn't got a resounding body like an acoustic guitar has. But anyway, what I discovered was we had wooden floors in the house, and my bed had a wooden frame. And I used to push the guitar up against the side of the bed, and the whole wooden floor would act as the soundboard. So it's literally, that's how I was, necessity is the mother of invention, Marty, So that's it. And that led me into, I was coming home from school one day, and I got walking beside a fellow called John Hannigan, and we got chatting, and I play guitar, and he says, "Gee, so do I. We'll have to form a band." And we did. We formed a little band, and we had a drummer. Jimmy Rafferty was the drummer, and a bass player from Bundoran, a fellow called Jimmy Gallagher. But we had no public address system. And one of the dances we were asked to play at, mind you, we weren't asked to play at many, we were pretty bad, but we were asked to play at this thing. We had no PA system, but Jimmy Rafferty, the drummer, his father was the curator in the church. He was the sacristan in the church. He looked after the thing. And we sneaked into the church, and we took the public address system from the church and brought it up to where we were doing the venue. And of course, after 3 songs, we blew every speaker in the thing, and we snuck it back and left it up. And the next Sunday morning, Father Deeney sat up to read the mass. And the you couldn't hear him because we had blown all the speakers. But it's only when I actually wrote my book, that was the first time anybody knew what happened to the speakers that day. But we were young and innocent, but we were going to change the world. I mean, when you're that age, the sky's the limit. And I remember,
and Charlie, did you ever think you were going to do something else? Do you ever look at in your career?
Well, you see,
you found your passion. You've obviously been very successful, and we'll go into the Eurovision in a minute. But did you have any?
Even talking about the Eurovision, I used to watch the Eurovision a lot in those days. And John Hannigan told me that I said one day, I'm going to win that competition someday. Now that was when I was 15 or 16 years of age. But anyway, that's by the way, we'll come to that later. But where was I now? I've kind of lost my train of thought now. Oh yeah. We formed this little band and we were very lucky, Marty, in that we lived beside Bundoran. Now, Bundoran was like the Blackpool of Donegal. It was like, it was amusement arcades and hobby horses and bumping cars. And, it was a holiday resort that most of the people came there from the north of Ireland. And particularly around the 12th of July, there would be complete exodus of the Catholic population out of Northern Ireland. They would all descend on Bundoran and they would spend 2 weeks in Bundoran then as their holidays. But we ended up getting a residency as a little band we had at the time, as a residency in a pub, playing 7 nights a week for 3 hours a night. And I did that for 3 years running, playing. And I learned more about music in those 3 years than I've learned ever since. Because in those days, people used to get, you went out for a night out. If you were out for a night out in Bundoran, somebody would say, Marty sings songs. And somebody send up and ask Marty to sing a song, and they get up. And half the time, was the audience themselves got up to sing. And you would get up and sing your song. And then you had what was known as the noble call. You could call on somebody else to sing. And you could be singing a Frank Sinatra song, and somebody else could be singing the Dubliners, and somebody else could be singing the Clancy Brothers, somebody else could be singing the Beatles. So we had to learn all these chords for all these songs. And most of them would start in one key and finish up 2 or 3 keys below or 2 or 3 keys higher. So you had to learn all these chords for the songs in as on the fly as you were going along.
And it was almost Charlie. Would you agree? It's almost like they have karaoke, but you're doing live karaoke, literally.
Absolutely live karaoke, yeah. And it was such. I mean, it was just great fun. Absolutely fantastic fun. Yeah. We learned an awful lot, and in those days as well, when you did your leaving cert, which I don't know what it would be equivalent in Australia, that was your launching pad then on a career, but. My mother and father always wanted me to have a steady job. You have to get a steady job. So I did. I got a steady job with the Electricity Supply Board, which is, the electricity company, and moved to Dublin. And the very first night I was in Dublin, a fella brought me to this pub called Slattery's in Capel Street, which was a folk and traditional pub. Now, I didn't know an awful lot about folk and traditional music because I was a rock and roller. I was an electric guitar player. But on that particular night, there were people like Frank Hart, a wonderful traditional singer, Liam O'Flynn, an Uilleann piper who played with Planxty in later years, sadly no longer with us. Donal Lunny, who is a huge star nowadays, in Irish traditional music. And, Paul Brady was there. And I heard these people playing acoustic guitars. I said, "Chickers, I'm going to have to." Rang up my father the next day. I need more money. I need to get another guitar. and I bought an acoustic guitar. And I literally spent the next 5 years going round to folk clubs, to cabaret venues. You might remember the Embankment in Tala, places like that. Yeah. And I'd sit watching the musicians and watching what they were playing. And I didn't play at all in public in those days, but just learned how to play the acoustic guitar. And after 6 years in Dublin, I saw an advertisement for a job, an ESB job in a power station in a place called Arigna. It was called the Arigna Power Station. In other words, a coal burning power station. And they were looking for somebody with my qualifications to go there. And magically, I had got married at this stage, and there was a free house with the job. And I said, wow, I'm going, I didn't know where Rigna was. I didn't know where it was, but there's a house. And
Yeah.
so we went and we arrived here in Drumshanbo, where I live now for the last 52 years. I'm living here now. But the first night I heard there was a knock on our door, and it was the woman from across the road, and she says, "I know you're only after coming. Would you like to come over for a cup of tea?" So I went over, and it turns out that this was a woman called Teresa Smullen, and she played the button key accordion. And on the same night, there was a fellow called Packy Dignan there, a concert flute player, and who turned out to be a great friend and a great influence because he was just, and indeed, I've written songs about him. He's so sadly no longer with us, but he
Yes.
came. He was a coal miner by day and a traditional music by night, but mostly traditional music was what he lived his made his earnings on. So I started a little group there, just two of us, Eamon Daly and myself, and we went around and played the pubs all around the place. But again, I was, we weren't exactly what people wanted because they wanted country and western, and we wanted to play Simon and Garfunkel and James Taylor and all these kind of people, and they wanted to hear country and western, Big Tom and Larry Cunningham and all the Daniel O'Donnell wasn't even around at those days, but um, but eventually we expanded the band and we won this big competition in Letterkenny. The
Mm,
Letterkenny Folk
mm, mm.
Festival was the biggest folk festival in the country at the time. And they always had a competition. And the prize for the competition was you won a recording contract. And previous winners, Clannad, who were a great Donegal band, and Pumpkinhead, and these different people had
And
won
just
it.
for listeners, what age were you at that time?
I would have been in my, what did we see now, 82, 30, about 32 at
Yeah,
that
yeah,
time.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
But now I've condensed my musical career into a short, but if you want to find out more, you can read it in my book. That I go into an awful lot more detail in my book. But the book is called Forever a Rock and Roll Kid. If anybody wants.
Yeah, and just when you mentioned that with the book, we were going to do too, but it's flashing up there now, the cover of your book, as we're talking. And I would recommend anyone to read this. But carry on your story, please. I want to give
Well,
you
anyway,
as much airtime.
we got a recording contract with Polygram Records, and we released our first single. Now I was 32 at this stage. Nowadays, my grandchildren have been in recording studios at 10 and 11 years of age. At
Yeah.
32 was my first time inside a recording studio. But we had this song called Ballyborough and Me, a song I'd written about a friend of mine from Ballyborough and Me. I'd never been there, but he used to talk after a few pints on a Saturday night. He'd be talking and crying into his pint about this wonderful place called Ballyborough. So I wrote this song, and it went into the Irish charts and was played non-stop on the
Oh,
radio. Now, can you imagine? I can remember. Imagine the first time you hear yourself on the radio. Wow, this is big time, And we were a four-piece band at this stage, and this led us on to a sort of a lot of chasing around the country, doing the day job, getting into your car at 5 o'clock in the evening, and heading for Dublin or Donegal or Kerry or wherever it was, and singing. But I had sort of loads and loads of energy in those days. At that age, and there was a goal in sight. I want to get to the next stage, and then it's to that
now,
stage.
can I ask you, Charlie, when you said that, zooming around that, were you in it for the money or the passion,
Oh, the
or both?
passion. Believe it or not, Marty, still the passion. I
I
would
gathered
play.
that.
I
Yeah,
would play anyway. And at
yeah.
this day, even at this stage, in my life, and I'm lucky now in that I can't pick and choose the places I play. Um, I say to say if I like the sound of it, if it's a comfortable gig to do, and people are going to sit and listen, great, I'll play. But in those days, I would have played on the moon. I was that anxious just to play, just to get my. And I was writing songs, and there was a lot of things I wanted to say. I wanted to sort of say romantic things. I wanted to say things about current affairs, about all kinds of things. I had loads and loads of songs, and at this stage, I'd say my songs are in the thousands at this stage. And I'm still writing songs all the time. So songwriting was a passion, and really. When I started singing my own songs first, I was so shy that I would never say they were my songs. I would just sing a song and see what reaction it would get. And
And
and eventually,
your songs also have been used by a lot of people even my good friend Daniel Donald's been the show.
Indeed,
Have,
indeed, yeah.
yeah,
You know,
they have used your songs
yeah, we
because,
recorded them, and you know,
yes,
and that's the biggest, that's the ultimate compliment, Marty. When
yeah,
somebody decides to record your song, you
yeah,
know, that's you couldn't get a better recommendation from anybody that they would sing your song. And to this day, even today, before we came and started to chat today, I was sending songs off to different artists, you know, because at this stage my voice wouldn't be able to, I wouldn't be able to sing the songs, a lot of the songs that I'm writing, but I do demo tapes of them and stuff like that and send them around to different artists all the time. And you know, Ireland now is, you probably roughly, well, you're a bit younger than me, but when I started in music and when I got interested in folk and traditional, the Dubliners were a huge act, and as were the
yeah,
Chieftains and the
yeah.
Clancy brothers, you know. Now that music then went on to a new level with Planksty and the Bothy Band, and then at another level when the Pogues came along and did it. And now it's going through another huge revival here in Ireland. You know, young people, young 20, 21-year-olds singing Irish ballads, you know, and the younger people are loving them. And it's the biggest music in the country at the moment. Bands like the Tumbling Paddies, the Whistling Donkeys, all these different bands. And, you know, it just shows you the strength of our own Irish music. I don't think there's a country in the world that has sort of a living tradition of music. You take the Fleadh na HÉireann, for example, which happens every year. At that Fleadh every year, there are 10,000 competitors playing different instruments. And last year there was a footfall of 350,000 people at the Fleadh in Wexford. So that's the level. There isn't a festival in the world has
Well, Charlie,
350,000
can
people.
I just interrupt you for a second? Exactly
Sure.
what you're saying. I want to allude to what you're saying is you look back, you're looking back in what, 1994, and I want people to know this because other people inspire. I've played your video when you won in the Eurovision Song Contest. I'm going to play this one now with yourself and with Paul, and that was done a year ago on RTE. And just let's listen to this, and we'll come up on the other side of this. Thank you, Charlie. So, see, my point is, look at that from years later.
I remember 62. I was 16 and so were you, and we lived next door on the avenue. Jerry Lee was big and Elvis too. Blue jeans, blue suede shoes, and we never knew what life held in store. We just wanted to rock and roll forevermore. We were the rock and roll kids, and rock and roll was all we did. And listening to those songs on the radio, I was yours and you were mine. But that was once upon a time. Now we never seem to rock and roll anymore. Now Johnny's in love with the girl next door. Mary's down at the record store. They don't want to be around us no more. Golden oldies, but we hardly speak. Too busy running to a different beat. Hard to understand, oh yeah. we were once like them. How I wish we could find those rock and roll days again. We were the rock and roll kids, come on. Rock and roll was all we did. And listening to those songs on the radio. I was yours and you were mine, but that was once upon a time. Now we never seem to rock and roll anymore. Would you help us out? You might. We were the rock and roll kids. Rock and roll was all we did. And listening to those songs on the radio. I was yours and you were mine, but that was once upon a time. Now we never seem to rock and roll anymore. I was yours and you were mine, but that was once upon a time. Now we never seem to rock and roll, no. We just never seem to rock and roll anymore.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Charlie. Thank you.
And there you are. Lovely. Okay. Charlie and Paul. Charlie's asked me to tell you that he's going to be performing in St. Clair's Church in Cavan tomorrow evening. So if you'd like to see Paul Harrington live, also he'll be in the Yacht in Lough Shinny on March 16th. And if that's not enough, you can catch them both at the Sugar Club in Dublin on April the 7th. And Joe, what's lovely about that, so just listening to you guys, and watching the audience, there's a real warmth. And everyone's kind of nodding their heads, and then you word for word, the panel even seemed to be happy. Yeah. And it was something really...
that's a good thing.
That's quite something. We should have booked in part one. But the bottom line is, it's a timeless... I think, Lou, you said that to me. It's timeless. It is that.
And it's so simple, and they're so good.
And they don't make them like you guys anymore. So thank you so much for coming in to see us.
Pleasure. Thank you.
You still have the great voices, and you're still passionate. The rock and roll kids. You're still a kid at heart. That was my point of doing that.
I am really. And, you know, the Eurovision, I've been friendly for many, many years with Brendan Graham, who wrote the song Rock and Roll Kids. Yeah. And I remember he sent it to me one day, and he said, "What do you think of this?" And I think that's really good. I think that could be a Eurovision song. And he entered it into the Euro song with the little competition in Ireland to select the Irish representative. And he put it in, and it didn't even qualify for the last date. He put it in another year, it didn't qualify. And then he put it in on the third year, he put it in, it qualified. The song qualified. Just Paul on the piano singing. And he rang me up and he said, you know, I'm after qualifying for the Irish Eurovision Song Contest, Euro song. And I said, well, whatever you do with that song, I said, don't put dancing girls on it, don't put flashing lights, don't put smoke bombs, just have Paul playing the piano and singing the song. He said, yeah. He said, but I think it needs something else. You know, he said, no, what do you mean? No, don't. It's perfect as it is. No, he said, it needs something else. And I said, what does it need? You, he said, it needs you. And I said, what do you mean? No, I want you to sing it with Paul. And I would, you know, I kind of was reluctant at the time because we had a lot going on domestically. We were moving house, we were doing all kinds of things. And I said, Chickers, I don't know, Brendan, give me 24 hours to think about it. And I thought about it, and I said to my wife, Coretti, I said, you know, oh, she said, yeah, I know, but you're not going to get a chance like this again, you know. So I said, okay. I rang Brendan, yeah, I'll do it. And the following Saturday night, that would have been maybe a Wednesday. Following Saturday night, we were to sing the song on the biggest TV show in Ireland called The Late Late Show. And I remember, I only met Paul that afternoon, and we had a little rehearsal. He played, I sang, we did the harmonies, and literally an hour, and we sang it on the Late Late Show, and the reaction was just amazing, you know. I said, "Gee, this is amazing, you know. This is really working." Just two old beardy fellas, a guitar and a piano, and we went on to win to get the chance to represent Ireland in the Eurovision in 1994. And
Yeah, and
you know, you're
Charlie, how did that feel? And we're just going to flash up a picture with yourself and Paul after you'd won it, a beautiful picture. How did that feel? Was that one of your? I mean, I would imagine, honestly, that must have been a surreal feeling. And looking at your both
absolutely.
photographs,
You
amazing.
see, we were both quite experienced musicians and singers, you know, and I didn't didn't even dream, because we were, it certainly wasn't what was people expected to win the Eurovision song. There was none of the usual sort of paraphernalia involved in it. It was just the two of us, and next thing you know, and I remember we were way out ahead with three countries still to vote, and we were well ahead at this stage.
Yeah.
And there was somebody said, "Get your guitar ready. You're going to have to get on and do your reprise of the song," you know. And I said, "No, I'll wait till the very last vote." You know, I said, "I don't want to myself standing up my guitar and saying the winner is Sweden," you know, and and I'm left with egg on my face. But yeah, and you see, the great thing, people said, I remember people said to me, "Were you nervous during the Eurovision?"
Hmm.
You know, I wasn't in the least nervous, because years earlier I was playing a very big event, a big folk festival, about 10, 12,000 people there. And I was a bit petrified at playing in front of all these people. And this American guy with a cowboy hat, I remember he came over and he said, "You okay, man?" And I said, "Well, I'm a bit nervous. I've never played this side." He said, "Well," he said, "Don't forget to enjoy it." And I had never thought of that. And when
Yes.
the Eurovision came up, I said, "I'm going to enjoy these 3 minutes if it kills me, you know, and I'm just going to enjoy it and go with the flow." And that's what I did. So there wasn't a nerve in my body. I wasn't the least nervous, you know. And even when we won, then, you know, the cherry on the cake to win, major stuff altogether, you know. And we'd great out fun as well, because you know, in the week coming up, you do a lot of press conferences, and we used to say, "Oh, we're going to win it without a doubt. We're going to win it. We had a chance of winning it as far as we were going to. Oh, we're going to win this," you know, and all this kind of. So we're like Muhammad Ali, you know, intimidating everybody else. We're going to win this,
I
but
bet your
it's
family were giving you that too. You're going to
oh,
win it. They would have been
yeah,
delighted. And
oh
just
yeah,
for yourself and that, my mum was alive at that time. She loved that song.
it still is a great song. Yeah,
It's a lovely song, but what it is if I may indulge our listeners, but the fact that yourself and Paul sitting there and singing, you get all the rock and roll bands, as I know you do the rock and roll bands, and everything like that. But
yeah.
for you guys to do that and people relate it all over the world, I think it's magnificent. But please carry on, Charlie.
Yeah, well, on that, the funny thing about it was we still sing. I still sing that song, and it still gets played on the radio all the time. And I've never tired of singing it, you know, because at the back of that song, if you listen carefully to the words, and Brendan Graham, who wrote "You Raised Me Up" and you know all those great songs,
Yeah,
Brendan,
yeah,
Brendan wrote the song after being at a Fats Domino concert. He went to a Fats Domino concert in the National Stadium, and it was a Friday night, and it was full of guys who were just coming directly from work, and they were in their pinstripe suits and their shirts and ties and the whole
yeah.
lot. And by the end of the night, Fats Domino had them dancing in the aisles. The ties were pulled off, the sweat was running off their brows, and he wrote down on the back of a cigarette packet, "They're like rock and roll kids." And that was where the impetus of the song came
Well,
from. And if you listen carefully,
I'm glad you said that because I was going to bring up why that came up. I'd written that down, but can you? We've got another 15 minutes, and I want to go into one thing at the moment. Is probably going to change, but you had and your son Shane. You lost Shane, and because of everything you do, is how did that affect you? And I've seen other interviews that you've done, and your beautiful wife. and you did, which I was found very powerful. If I must say to my listeners, it's words that was put in that you'd said was, I think it was in the Irish Mirror or something that I read, but uh, normally that can hurt the family, but it brought you closer with your wife. But the losing of your son and that accident probably shouldn't have happened. But do you want to just tell our listeners a little bit about that, if you don't mind, please?
Well, Shane, he was the best thing that ever happened to us, because not only was it was lovely to have him as a son, but he was steeped in Leitrim in that he played football for the Leitrim senior football team and had played at every level of football, club football, minor football, under 21s. He played for Leitrim, and we used to go to all the matches, and it was always it was just felt so good. And I remember even in Eurovision year or the following year, I was at Croke Park, and it was the first time I saw him run out onto Croke Park, and that was the proudest moment you could possibly imagine. To play on the sacred grass of Croke Park, and so he was playing for Leitrim right through 95, 96, 97, 98, and he Leitrim were in the Connacht Club Championship or team, senior championship that year, and they played Galway, and they were knocked out of the championship. And Martin Carney, who was a football pundit and Donegal man as well, rang us up and said, would Shane be interested in spending the summer in Boston playing for an Irish football team over there? And I said, would he? What? Of course he would, and eventually
Yeah.
he went off to play football over there, and he had a day job then. They got him a job working for a building company. And unfortunately, funny, a couple of days before I'd been talking to him on the phone, and I said, what are you doing, or where are you? He said, oh, I'm up in this big scaffolding. And he said there's another building site over from us, and they're all black over there. And he said they have a language all their own. I can't understand what they're saying. We meet at lunchtime, and I really need a translator, to find out what they're actually saying. But anyhow, one of the days he was up on the scaffolding, and the scaffolding collapsed, and himself and a young man called Ronan Stewart from Dundalk both were killed in the collapse. And the next we heard about it was, I remember at the door, there was a knock on the door, and it was two people who aren't normally you would expect them to see at the door, and they told us the bad news. And I just went complete. I nearly passed out, and I ran down into this very room down at the back of the house, and I just curled up into a corner, and I spent about 20 minutes, just trying to come to terms with what's after happening. And then it occurred to me, I'm going to have to be strong here. I'm going to have to be the person that looks after everybody else, So I literally pulled myself together and came back. And I think when death happens, suddenly it's very bad. But when death happens anyway in Ireland, we have everybody calls to your house, and they call in loads and loads of people call to your house. And I used to think, because I do it as well, if somebody dies, I call to their house for the wake, as they call it, the wake. And I used to think, well, it's very imposing. It's very imposing yourself on somebody when they're going through grief. But when it happened to me, I realized that it's actually hugely important, and it's hugely it does help an awful lot that people are around you, and people are wanting to help you in every possible way. And I remember on the night we brought Shane home, we delivered him up to the church, and we were all back in the house. There was all kinds of people in the house. The house was full of people, and there was a knock on the door, and it was Mary McAleese, the president of Ireland at the time, and she said, "I just came to express my condolences." And she came in, and she spent 2 hours telling stories and yarns and all. This was the president of Ireland. You kind of think, wow, what is going on here? And I remember she hung her coat on the stairs outside, and she was inside. The women in the house were all going around looking at the coat and looking at the label on it and all that kind of carry on. But totally, and I remember Tony McGowan, who was the chairman of the Leitrim County Board at the time, came in, and he didn't know Mary McAleese was here, but he wanted to give out to somebody that they didn't have the flag on the coffin, and he came in. You forgot to put the flag, and he took a double take, and he saw it was Mary McAleese.
I'll keep that quiet. But going back to that's very nice what she turned up to do.
Yeah.
Just leading back to your beautiful wife. How did she deal with how did both of you do it? Because I have read some stuff that you've been on and which I agree that sometimes it can it goes into silence. It goes into everything, but I believe with you and your wife, it brought you closer together.
Well, absolutely.
I am sorry about your loss and your wife. I think with it's to lose a child. I have 6 in different ones. I couldn't imagine it, and with Shane, it's like. But how did you guys deal with it both together?
We shared the burden, and my wife is a very social person. She loves being out meeting people, and between the two of us looking after each other and the children, the children were grown up. In my daughter Tara and her sister Kira. Kira was in the Isle of Man on a summer job, and they came over, and between the whole lot of us, and what was, we just. We knew we had to be there for one another, and we literally, even today, we've pictures of Shane everywhere. Just last night, my wife was up getting, looking after the grave and putting flowers and watering flowers and stuff like that. So his memory has kept us together, there's something, again, the people, I remember when we went over to America after it happened. We arrived in America, and there was these people called Jimmy and May Gallagher, who were originally from. We didn't know them from Adam. They had moved to America 40 years previously, but they met us at the plane. They opened their house to us. They looked after every possible thing we could want. They had a wake in their house. People came to their house in Boston for a wake. So this was a huge outpouring of just comfort, people who comforted us. And, we had awful times. It was awful, seeing him in the coffin, etc., all that stuff that happens to everybody. But on the day of his funeral mass in Boston, the Oma bombing happened. And we were bringing Shane home the next day. And we were on the plane with people who had lost friends, relatives in the Oma bombing. And I remember the air hostess came up to us and she said, "He's just underneath you there in the hold." And then I was listening to other people on the plane saying, "Oh God, poor the relations had been killed," and all, So it in a way, we shared their burden, they shared our burden, and you begin to you realize that this happens. You think when it happens, you think, "Oh, it's only us. Why did it happen to us?" God Almighty, why us? And then you realize every time you see a motor accident on the road, or somebody gets killed, you really know how they feel. You have to feel, because we can, when you go look through the troubles in the north, in the north of Ireland, and we became sort of blasé about it. Okay, there was a man killed and 2 people were killed in a bomb. But you didn't think those 2 people had relatives and friends and mothers and fathers and all that kind of stuff. So I now know what it's like for somebody else when somebody else experiences what I experienced, and obviously people did when what happened to us as well. That's basically how we
so.
do it.
And not only that, Charlie, as you said there, just you triggered in my head. It's talking to people and not thinking that you're the only one that agrees with that. Talking to people and mixing with families, like you said, when your son went, people came up to you, and that's a community thing. It means so much for the community. I know it'll never cure it, but it helps that people the community, and as you just alluded to, there is other people living that. You're there for them as well, and I can tell with your, with your music, and just going back for a little bit, it's like the music that you've done, and I know you've got lots of grandkids. How does your grandkids think about your music? Are they bored with it, or do they like it? Are you not too
Well,
trendy?
I have two daughters, and one of the daughters, her kids are big into sport, athletics, football, everything else, and art and stuff. And then I have another family, Tara's family, who are totally musical. I mean, they've inherited the gene. My grandson Porrick now, he's the conductor of the Trinity College Orchestra this year.
Oh, wow.
Um, and he's over in Rugby in England teaching music now for the summer holidays, and he's playing at one of the biggest festivals with the orchestra. He's playing at the Electric Picnic Festival this year here in Ireland. It's the biggest music festival in the country, apart from the Fleadh, and he's big into it. My other son, Cathal, or grandson Cathal, he's a violinist, he's a singer, and he has performed in musicals, loves musical theatre, and he goes to he's a bit like their great grandmother, in that he's big into exactly the same kind of music as she was. So it comes and it comes and it comes, and I'm so proud of them. But and I taught the fellow that's conducting, Porrick, who conducts the orchestra and choirs and all kinds of things. He's involved. He's just non-stop at music. But I taught him the guitar, and he writes songs, and he's recorded songs and been in songs on the radio, all that kind of stuff. And I'm so proud of them.
Charlie, you just said they're very proud. You're very proud of them, and I think I must say this is. I seen one thing on a thing one time. It says, you watch your parents grow up. Your parents watch you grow up, but you watch them growing up. And that's what, like in certain ways, looking the way you talk about how proud you are of your children and your grandchildren. And I think that's magnificent. You're given a talent, what you're doing. Now, I'm going to ask you a question because we've got about 5 minutes, 10 minutes to finish up. I want you to play a song for us, and any song that you would like, and this will be an exclusive for Marty. You play a song that's from your heart, whatever you would like.
It's funny that we have been just talking about grandchildren. This song was written way back 40 years ago. I wrote it about Anne Lovett, a young girl who was pregnant and never told anybody, her parents or anybody like that. And she sadly died in a place called Granard. And the whole idea that she wasn't able to tell her parents or her friends. I wrote this song, sort of said, if something like that ever happens to any of my kids, I want them to be sure. I hope everything goes well, but inevitably there will be things that won't. And this is a song I wrote about that, and it says, I hope you find the feet of a dancer, but if you don't, we're always here. It goes like this. I hope you find the feet of a dancer. I hope you can sing in the rain. I hope you find all the easy answers to your pain. It won't be easy. What can I say? 'Cause there will be trouble on the way, and around every corner, terror and tears. But always remember that we're here. I hope you find the feet of a dancer. I hope you can sing in the rain. I hope you find all the easy answers to your pain. And I hope you find love and affection. I hope you find someone who cares. I hope you find all the right directions everywhere, everywhere. A shoulder to cry on whenever you're low. You can rely on us, you know, 'cause there's nothing too crazy and there's nothing too dear. Just always remember that we're here. I hope you find the feet of a dancer. I hope you can't sing in the rain. I hope you find all the easy answers to your pain. And I hope you find love and affection. Hope you find someone who cares. I hope you find all the right directions everywhere, everywhere.
My God, Charlie, I want to. Honestly, I'm in awe of that song, but also
Well, thank you.
an
Thank you.
inspiring dad. The way you put so much passion into your music, and I know my listeners, going to be a certain amount of people are listening to this, and they will have tears in their eyes listening to that song. And even for myself, it's emotion because everyone can relate to it, even though you wrote that for a reason. What inspired you to write that? I know you alluded at the start.
Well, you know, there comes a time in your life when you're what they say in the empty nest thing happens. You know, they're all gone out into the world, and you want them to be successful, and you know, you want them to, you know, that things to work for them, and but inevitably, nothing. Life have its ups and downs, and inevitably, they're going to. They're going to need you again, you know, even in adulthood, you know, and even now, Porrick and myself and all the other kids, you know, they come here and they, you know, you want to make sure you're there for them, you know, and no matter what happens, you know, and bad things happen to your children, not, you know, in our own case, but, you know, people get into all kinds of trouble and, you know, they need to have some kind of security that you're there to help them. And equally so, I suppose, if things happen to us, they would look after us as well.
Well,
That's
I would hope
basically
so. Yeah, we give them duty of care. They should give us it back, you know.
exactly. Yeah,
But yeah, when
exactly.
you ring them and they go, it's like my daughter, I ring her and she goes, Dad, what did you ring me 5 times today? I'm busy. I said, well, I wouldn't have had to ring 5 times. You answered the first time. Yeah, they have a duty to us. Now, listen to me. Oh, my God, Charlie, you're a beautiful man. I could talk to you and I can tell with family. I'm going to send all these links and people can see more with you. And I'm going to play a couple of songs at the end of it. And I wanted to bring in this one is the video, which I want to play at the end is the Heartbreak Hotel. I
Yeah,
love that.
that's
I listened to it today, but I must say it was very annoying because I was going around the backyard and I was singing it in my head. But oh my God.
well, you know, the song. We all, everybody of our generation, your generation, even my generation, has had their Elvis moments. You know, you know, I don't think it could have gone through in our lifetime. We could have gone through anything like Elvis. He was unique. He was something, you know, a phenomenon, if you like. And you know, I go back to when I'd heard him first, you know, and saw him in his early movies and saw him, you know, playing the guitar and all those great songs, the early Elvis. And I said, I must write a song about Elvis, you know. And what I say in the song, I stayed at the Heartbreak Hotel. I wore those blue suede shoes, you know that I lived my life through you at one
Yeah.
point in my life. I lived my life through Elvis, and that's where the song came about. And you know, people do like it. Yeah.
Well, it's not that. I'm going to let you go, but it's not that. It's the variety of shows that you can do. And if you can give a big shout out to Paul Harrington and tell him, thank you very much. I love his work. And I'm going to let you go. And thank you so much for coming on, Charlie.
Marty, it's been an absolute pleasure. And when I'm talking to you now, I realize, well, there's an hour gone talking. It was 3 hours the last time, and I know well.
I know.
Probably
Oh
3
my
hours after
God,
this.
I can talk. Everyone that knows me are laughing their heads off now. But you know what? Have a look at Charlie. You're a beautiful man, and we're going to stay in touch. Well, you can't get rid of me now, but I would just like to say to my listeners here in Australia, New Zealand, all over the world, and you can go to look on life stories on our main channel, moralinjuryinternational.com, and you can follow more with Charlie and listen to all these all these songs, and we'll flash up there at the end your book as well. Charlie, stay in touch. You're a beautiful man. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Marty. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks, buddy. Likewise.
In by the side door, no stir. No need to worry, Kate, the coast is clear. We can make a little music for the night is ours, and it'll sound a little sweeter after hours. Let's hear it. After hours, really let your hair down. After hours with the lights low. Forget about your troubles, boys in blue. Put up another round. Country boy from a faraway country town. But when I heard that news, that awful news, my whole world came a-tumbling down. Well, if I just said someone had stolen all my youthful dreams away, well, I never thought I'd feel such a misery that I felt on that sad August day. 'Cause I stayed at the Heartbreak Hotel. I wore those blue suede shoes. Oh, I knew your song so well. Since you'd gone, I sang nothing but the blues. 'Cause I stayed at the Heartbreak Hotel. Your hound dog, he bit me too. On that farewell day you fell. My heart sang a loving you.
Cluttered up with secrets, you never show your hand. There are very few arrangements in your band. I could talk all night about you and not say a single word. You've got the shortest story ever heard. Are you shy? Or rather some more reasons why you don't seem to laugh or to cry? Or is it simply that I can't see you? Is it fair? There has to be something to share. I wonder if you're really there. Or is it simply that I can't see you? You keep a short selection, but seldom someone new. You suffer their devotion to you. Stimulating conversation would seem where you are at. Mostly you're just talking through your hat. Are you shy? Or rather some more reasons why you don't seem to laugh or to cry? Or is it simply that I can't see you? Is it fair? There has to be something to share. I wonder if you're really there. Or is it simply that I can't see you? You get that look upon your face, that kind of look that you can't erase. And I got a face that you don't really want me. Are you shy? Or are there some more reasons why you don't seem to laugh or to cry? Or is it simply that I can't see you? Is it fair? There has to be something to share. I wonder if you're really there. Or is it simply